Hello, my name's Tom Brady, and welcome to Open a Bottle by the Oxford Wine Company, a short form version of the Oxford Wine and Spirit podcast. My guest today is Sonia Elia, Brand Advocacy Manager for Cocchi, overseeing a delicious portfolio of Vermouth, Aperitivo, and Grappa. The bottle I have in my hand is a bottle of Cocchi Storico Vermouth di Torino, to give it its full title. And it's a product I think a lot of my bartender friends will be very, very familiar with. Sonia, welcome to the podcast. I was hoping we could start today by educating, myself a little bit on Cocchi, the brand. It's taken the bartending world by storm in, I think, the last decade or so. So what's the story behind the company?
Thank you very much, Tom, for having me here this morning. It's absolutely a pleasure for me to share some of the Cocchi love with you today. So, as you mentioned, of course, the last decade has been really amazing for us. But going back with the history a little bit of Cocchi. So, Cocchi was established in 1891 in Asti. So we are in the Piedmont area, pretty much 1 hour far from Turin. Cocchi, it is a surname. Giulio Cocchi was a real man. So he was a young pastry chef from Florence. And as many young people, he started to move around. And that's where he ended up in Asti, where he fell in love with everything that surrounded it. So I'm talking about the food culture, I'm talking about the drink culture, I'm talking about the people, to the point where we realized he really wanted to stay there. He started to look for a job, and he got his job in one of the bars in the main square of Asti, which is a medieval city. The main square, it is called Piazza Alfieri. And the bar he started to work is now known as Bar Il Cocchi. So once in Asti, he started to develop his skills in aromatized wine. Of course, having a background as pastry chef, where he was already dealing with extract, tincture, elixir. So he kind of had a little bit of that knowledge. But in Asti is where he developed most of his skills. So Giulio Cocchi started to create a lighter style of aromatized wine, as we know today is called the Americano, as in the category. We can say thanks to Giulio Cocchi, he is the creator of the entire subcategory of aromatized wines, such as Americano and Barolo Chinato. These all came from him, and it's amazing how he created almost two opposite products, from a lighter style Americano with having a main herb which is ginseng, to a Barolo Chinato. People thought like he was a crazy guy, like aromatizing a very expensive wine such as Barolo. But he was really successful. And what helped him to succeed in his business was that in Asti, he fell in love with everything, and he fell in love with a girl as well. And I'm saying this because it is really important, as it was a family business. His wife, which then together had 7 kids. These were the generation of Giulio Cocchi. And it was really important because, of course, he started to develop portfolio, and the products were really good and successful, to the point he had to open, and he started to open retail place around the area. So we can talk that in the early 1900, Giulio Cocchi had already about 13 retail places where people could taste the product, could buy the product, or simply sit and enjoy the product. The new generation came in, traveled all around the world, and by 1930, we've seen Cocchi already all over the world. So we are in the 30s, which leave us about 40 years where Giulio Cocchi developed a really solid portfolio. And that was until the 70s, when the generation of Cocchi comes to an end. That's when we have the Bava family that took over in the 70s from Cocchi. So when the Bava family in the 70s bought the whole business from Cocchi, so the Bava family is a third generation wine producers. So as you might understand, And when it comes to aromatized wine, the wine plays a really important role. And the Bava family has all the knowledge and the expertise of this. They have more than 50 hectares of land between Barolo and Monferrato, where they produce Barolo, Barbera, Barbaresco, so all these beautiful wines and more. And we are here, of course, in Piedmont. Thanks to the Bava family, we can say that since the 17th, Cocchi has never been interrupted in terms of production. The current CEO is a 90 years old man called Piero. Then we have the three brothers, which are Roberto, Paolo, and Giulio, which have been played a really important role for the business. So Giulio is our enologist, is an expert in wine. And again, when it comes to aromatized wine, we have Paolo, which is our botanist, also known as our master blender, is the one who plays with the formula with all the products. And then we have Roberto, which has played a very important role by traveling all around the world with a bunch of Artemisia in his pocket to show the world the main herb behind Vermouth di Torino. So the three brothers have played a really important role. When I was bartending, I was using Cocchi as a product. I was already mixing the product. I loved the product. I probably didn't know even what it was, but once you open the bottle and you taste it, it's like, hey, this is good. You might not have the whole knowledge, but when you taste it, I think it's unbelievable. And now, since 1 year and 4 months, I've joined the company as a brand advocacy manager overlooking Europe, but with the main focus in UK and Italy. And for me, it's like, that train in life that comes only once, and I couldn't believe. And nowadays, Cocchi is my everyday life, and I love it.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So, first of all, we have one of the best places in the world for food and drink in Piemonte, and places like Asti and Alba and Monferrato, and making just these incredible wines, Barolo, Barbaresco, Dolcetto, Barbera. You have a culture for food as well, with incredible truffles and an incredible bar culture coming out of Torino as well. So we start off with that. We have a heritage product, which is really exciting. And then we have a family affair where we've got the family working on the product right up until the present day. And that brings yourself into it, being a bartender in London, which is such an important, fascinating part of the Vermouth story as well. The bartenders coming over, particularly in the UK as well, I say, with the cocktail culture we have here in and especially in London, and it all just comes together. And today we get to sit down and taste it and talk a little bit about production and hopefully talk a little bit more about the category. If we take a step back and we consider some listeners who are maybe a little bit unfamiliar with vermouth as a category, how would you describe this liquid from a production point of view in terms of it being an aromatized wine?
Essentially, in a very simple steps. Once we have the wine, we take the wine and we do have our herbs, botanicals, which are already dried. So having the wine, having the herbs and botanicals. We make our infusion, our extract, our tincture in alcohol. So we take the herbs, we aromatize in alcohol. So we create our formulas, for example. Imagine this as a big teapot with a tea bag where all the botanicals are in. And that's our botanicals, let's say, for the creation of our Storico here. We keep doing infusion in and out for about 2-3 weeks. It depends. Here, it's never the same. Why I'm saying this is never the same because we work with natural ingredients. So especially with everything surrounded us, global climate change, etc. So the ingredients are never the same. So the cinnamon, for example, from this year is not the cinnamon from last year, and so do the orange or the rhubarb. So that's why we don't have the recipe, but we have formulas that allow us to keep us consistency. Once we have our final extraction, we pressing, filtering, so we have like sort of clear liquid without sediments. Having that, we combine this with the wine, with sugar, and then resting and bottling. So for us, our philosophy is to work with the freshness of the product rather than the aging. And that's why we don't do any barrel aging. So that's how the process in a very simple way does happen. When it comes to Cocchi, there is no use of colorant. The color that we have comes either from the wine itself and from our extract and tincture that we do. So it's very clean and natural product. The process seems very small, very simple, but you gotta test every time you have the cinnamon, let's say, or the orange. You gotta test this. How does it work with our infusion? So it is a very, very, very long process. But in simple ways, yes, botanicals, infusion, teapot, wine, and very important, 75% inside a bottle of an aromatized wine. And what does describe an aromatized wine? It is 75% must be wine. So as you might understand, the wine is a very key product for us. It's the base, and you want to have a very good wine. No problem with that, because we are with the Baba family and we are in Piedmont, so that's absolutely okay. We have an ABV that goes from 14.5% to 22%, which then you can add colorant, sugar, etc., etc. But in terms of Cocchi, that's how we kind of produce our aromatized wines.
And there's a wonderful sort of story about vermouth and aromatized wines, how they kind of move from the Savoy Empire, starting in northwest Italy and moving up into the Alps and then across the south of France and down into Spain. And there's a wonderful story that I'm sure we'll get to sometime. But I want to focus in today just on Vermouth di Torino, because when we talk about a Vermouth di Torino, we're talking about an IGP, a protected geographical indication, which means there are certain rules that a producer needs to follow in order to write Vermouth di Torino on the label. Could you tell us a little bit about what these rules are?
When it comes to Vermouth di Torino, we have a specific rule. It's like if you mention champagne, cognac, Scotch whiskey. Those categories that have rules, they must be produced in a certain area within a certain criteria, and same is the Vermouth di Torino. So nowadays there are many countries producing vermouth, but that's the whole category. But Vermouth di Torino, in terms of main rules, of course, it must be produced and packaged within the Piedmont area. It goes from, it must have an ABV that goes from 16% to 22%, and a minimum of 0.5 grams per liter of Artemisia must be used. Artemisia is, again, is a must when it comes into Vermouth di Torino. In terms of wine, you can only use Italian wines. And in terms of packaging, you must package in a glass bottle within a certain measurement. And in terms of label, you cannot state any sort of borough or area where within the area production. So it is very strict. These are the main ones, but there will be many others. But essentially, yes, when we're talking about Vermouth di Torino, we're talking about ABV, Artemisia, production, location, specific area.
And then from a stylistic perspective, if, for example, I'm working in the Oxford Wine Company shop and somebody comes to me and says, what is the difference between a Vermouth di Torino and a Spanish style vermouth from Barcelona? How would you define stylistically a Vermouth di Torino?
So the French always have been known as to produce a drier style of vermouth. Drier, paler, slightly more bitter, maybe with a little bit more in flavor in oxidation. Not a bad thing, but just as in to understand how you might taste, which is completely different from an Italian vermouth, which has more like, it's definitely sweeter. It has a bittersweet aroma, and is more spiced. You're able to feel more spice within the vermouth. Very different from the Spanish one, which is more like powerful, fruity, and more like definitely sweeter. And so why the Spanish vermouths are probably most suitable to drink on its own. So that's kind of the main difference between the three, I would say. So one, definitely the Italian vermouth for me has more versatility because of the structure, the bittersweet taste and the spices, which is something that helps when it comes to cocktail, for example.
I'm just going to pour myself a little glass now, but while I do, what are some of the key botanicals and key flavors I should be looking out for when we taste a bottle of the Cocchi di Torino?
Sure. So I'll join you into this. When it comes to cheers, always
Cheers.
say salute. So when it comes to
Salute.
Vermouth, Cocchi, Storico, Vermouth di Torino, we're definitely looking at, of course, Artemisia. We're looking at bitter orange. We're looking at quinine, and we're looking at rhubarb as key botanicals.
Artemisia, sorry to just interrupt you there. Artemisia, is that, we would say, wormwood? Is there
Wormwood.
is it the same thing, or is that?
Yes, wormwood, absolutely. Mostly grows in the Alps. That's why the geographic position of Piedmont is really important. It is surrounded by Alps, and that's where most of the Artemisia grows. And that's the characteristic of this bitter flavor. So once you infuse in alcohol, it becomes extremely bitter. But here we have our amazing Cocchi Storico, and I will say on the nose, it opens up a world because you can definitely get the bitter note, sweet note, you get apricot, you get raisins, you get Christmas spices, you get rhubarb. I would say the apricot, kind of stone fruit. It's a lot. Definitely there is a hint of vanilla there. It's so beautiful. It's like a perfume.
I find this nose absolutely wonderful. It's kind of all encapsulating in terms of the power that comes in. I think you get some really almost kind of sharp, fragrant red fruit raspberries, but then there's a kind of marshmallowy characteristic as well on the nose that it brings me to it. These are kind of different flavor characteristics to probably, in terms of what botanicals are going in there, but that's the aromas that are evoking for me right now. But you're absolutely right. There's that rhubarb is right in there straight away, and it has that you feel like almost like a little bit of kind of cola bottles or cola or something like that as well.
I've heard this so many times when it comes to this vermouth, actually. And bear in mind, each of us has a different palate. But that's why when I say like he opens up a world, it's because for me, it reminds me as well some of my childhood. Some people get marshmallow, they call, as you say, like it reminds me kind of, back in the days. So there is a lot going on. There is definitely a lot going on.
May I ask what the base wine is for this liquid?
So here we have a base of Moscato wine. And then, of course, these are the main key botanicals. Between, I would say, 25, 30 or more, who knows, herbs. We keep it secret, of course. We don't want to share in terms, of course, our formula, but there is a good amount mix of herbs and botanicals in there. And Moscato wine, of course, does a lot of the job in this.
Such an aromatic wine as well. No, I feel like there's a sort of rose petal character that you associate with Moscato coming through as well. So, no, really wonderful. Should we have a little taste?
We should, yes.
I think it's important to say when you do taste it, you can tell this is coming from a wine base. There's a lovely level of acidity in there. You can it feels like a wine, but then it feels like a wine that's been elevated with this added kind of bitterness coming from the botanicals.
the beauty of this and why it plays also an important role when it comes to cocktail is because it has sweetness, the sugar, it has the bitterness which comes from the herbs, from the botanicals, we have the acidity, the wine. So these are three elements that usually sometimes you look in when you compose a cocktail, for example. That's why vermouth plays important roles when it comes to cocktail. And that's why we have probably many classic with where vermouth it's there. It gives body structure, it gives a bitter, it gives a sweet, it gives acidity. Gives a lot.
I can really see it elevating particular characteristics in specific spirits as well. But I think it's really important to say that having this by itself, it's absolutely delicious. Sometimes bartenders can relegate vermouth to being a mixing component. And I think this, even just as we're sipping on its own, I think works perfectly. But also just having it with a little bit of ice, with a little splash of soda, I think it comes out. It's absolutely fantastic. And then, of course, I think I personally love mixing vermouth with tonic, and I think it adds it's a really good counter to having gin if you want to have a drink with a slightly lower ABV as well. I don't know if you would agree with me on that one.
I do agree indeed with you, absolutely, because you've mentioned that. So if I tell you three words, which are sip, stir, spritz, okay? So in here, we can probably talk for another 5 hours about this, but just to make it clear, when it comes to this vermouth, and this applies for us across the whole portfolio, not only in Vermouth di Torino, in this case, Cocchi Storico. So sip it, absolutely. In the past, in fact, the vermouth was drunk very cold, either from the fridge or from the ice, in a small Nican or a glass, lemon peel, and that was the aperitivo of all day drinking. Absolutely right. You love it. You mentioned with ice or some orange peel, orange wedge. Absolutely, you still sipping that vermouth, which is a joy. You mentioned soda. Yes, here we are building up this sort of vermouth. We're building up the Cocchi Storico. So we have soda, which recall vermouth and soda, recall what is known as a vermutino cocktail, a very kind of old style mixing, or with tonic as VNT, the vermouth and tonic. Very nice, refreshing, long, low bowl, I will say. As here we are with a very low ABV, and we're talking about 16% in the bottle. So here is how you can spritz your vermouth with a tonic or with a soda. Here is how you can steer, and here we open up the world of cocktails. Okay, so and I like to, and as I said, like in my career of bartending, I've been mixing coffee, most of the classic. And nowadays I just play around with different flavor, which is amazing, because the versatility it's really big in this product. Let's take one of the most cocktail known around the world, which is the Negroni. Okay, the Negroni, I believe, is a vermouth-based cocktail. Why I'm saying this? Because we start from the beginning when vermouth was drunk on its own. Then we add the bitter, which became what we know as Mito. Mito, as it stays for Milano, Torino. So Milano had the bitter, Torino had the vermouth, combination of a classic cocktail. When Americans arrived in Italy, they add soda into it. We have what we know as Americano. Later on, we have gin instead of the soda. What we know as Negroni became really, really popular all around the world. But you can swap out the gin, you can put the bourbon. We have Boulevard there. Before that, you can swap out the bourbon, you can put in the Prosecco, we have the Negroni Sbagliato. But what I'm saying here is we keep swapping the sparklings, the spirits, the soda, but what stays there are the vermouth and bitter. So most likely you will sip the vermouth, and it's unlikely that you will sip a bitter. So that's why I believe when we're talking about the Negroni journey, for example, I believe it is a vermouth-based cocktail. And with Cocchi, with the versatility, because it's a very imbalance between the bitterness and the sweetness, I believe it has the ability to adapt to different situations when it comes to sparkling wine or spumante or prosecco, when it comes to spirits with a little bit of vanilla, such as bourbon, or botanical forward, such as gin. That's why it fit perfectly in this sort of drinks, for example. And probably in the Negroni journey, I don't know, we can have 10 or more cocktails. One vermouth, 10, 12 cocktails. So that's the way I see it, and that's the versatility and the power of Cocchi Storico, Vermouth di Torino.
Preach. Amen. I agree with that 100%. And I love the passion with which you delivered it, because it just makes sense. It just makes sense. And I love that. And I've never heard this phrase before, mito.
Yeah,
I think it's fantastic.
Mid 1800. That's when we have the mito around. Yeah.
One of my particular favorites to switch up a Negroni with these days is mezcal. And I feel the smokiness combines so well with the sweetness and the bitterness coming from the vermouth and the bitter. We're running out of time quite rapidly, so I just wanted to ask you, Sonia, if you have any final thoughts on the Cocchi Storico Vermouth di Torino.
Sure. If I could describe that in very short sentence: Vermouth di Torino, Cocchi Storico. It is your black shoes in your wardrobe. Black goes well with everything, and that's how probably I will describe it in terms of a very, very short sentence. I think that says a lot, and something that I must mention as well. Of course, across despite with the Vermouth di Torino, which is our sweet vermouth, we do have a portfolio of 6 SKUs, which are 2 Americano. One was the original product of Giulio Cocchi, the Americano Bianco, which has been also the replacement of Pinot Lillet when it was out of the market for the very famous Vesper Martini. And in addition to that was the Bava family having the Americano Rosa as well. So these are the wine that we use to upgrade your spirits. And then of course we have the Vermouth, Storico, Extra Dry, and then Amaro, and the Barolo Chinato. With this amazing portfolio, I can tell you that from our last report in Drinks International, we are number 1 top trending vermouth and number 1 top selling vermouth in the world, which is such an unbelievable achievement for us.
And Sonia, how can we follow you, and how can we follow Cocchi online on social media?
So we have Cocchi 1891 Instagram page. We do have Cocchi_UK for the UK page, and myself is Elia_S90 as ELIA _S90. And yes, that's how you can find us and follow us with all the updated news.
So that's it. So if everybody is out there, if you're not already following Elia and already following Cocchi, then jump on that right now. And of course, don't forget to follow me at What Tom Drank, and even more importantly, at the Oxford Wine Company for all of your wine and spirits needs. Sonia, thank you so much. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Ciao.
Thank you so much, Tom. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.